I'm now going to introduce Richie, who is going to give us a bit of an update on what's been going on in the Good Food Nation side of the conversation. So Pete, over to you.
Great. Hi, everyone. I've just got a few minutes, but I wanted to say I'll go through the slides first really quickly, and then I just want to sum up something. So Chelsea, give us the next slide. So Scottish Food Coalition, I'm introducing on behalf of Nourish. As you can see, they're a real logo fest, lots of different organizations, and importantly, as we've heard today in the participation here, across the piece, so Scottish Care, who is an organization of private nursing homes, are really committed to the right to food, both for their staff and their residents. The Scottish Crofting Federation of Small Farmers, Locavore, a social enterprise, selling food through shops, WWF, one of the biggest environmental organizations in the world, Trussell Trust, Citizen Advice, a huge range of organizations have come together to call for a Good Food Nation bill focused on the right to food. Sorry if I haven't mentioned it there. Next slide. And the point of the bill is a framework bill. And just explaining what a framework bill is, it's an overall approach to trying to tackle the problems in the food system, which, as you can see, we've scattered here as different bits of the jigsaw. But biodiversity loss, just a quick example, the biggest impact on biodiversity, wildlife in the whole world is the food system, reckoned to be responsible for nearly 3/4 of the loss of biodiversity. And it's so frightening. Half of the world's wildlife and half the world's marine life has disappeared in my lifetime, in the last 40 years even. So we're on a sort of nature crisis at the moment, and the food system is responsible for that. We can only tackle that through changing the food system. Deforestation, and then what we heard about today, people having to rely on food banks, having to go to emergency food for the want of a bus fare, problems about animal welfare, problems about working conditions for people in the food industry. We heard yesterday about Ukrainian fruit pickers being in real trouble because their visas aren't the proper visas for Ukrainians coming here. They're the visas for Ukrainians on temporary things, and they might have to get deported if they can't change their visas. And then all the illnesses that come from people having to eat food that's not the best for their health. And in Scotland, we've got a persistent, real problem with that. And then, just a problem for kids going to school hungry, and even for preschool kids growing up with a poor diet, sets them up for lifelong problems. So all these different things, but they go into different departments. That's the problem. So next slide. And just as one example here, because different departments have got different goals and ambitions, you get a real mess of different problems. So this just, anybody who's interested in beef, we could talk all day about that, but basically, the farmers and the industry want to have more beef and export more beef. That means putting more of them in sheds, which means there's a concern about animal welfare, but also beef animals contribute to greenhouse gas emissions. And then the health people say maybe we're eating too much meat anyway. So who's going to come together to actually sort that problem out? Next slide. So what we're talking about with the Good Food Nation bill is a framework to try and bring these different ideas together. So we're making food policy, we're thinking of everything all at once. And that's really tricky for any government to do, any local authority to do, because we all work in different departments. Even Nourish sometimes, we don't know what somebody else in the team's doing. So in Scottish government, UK government, European Commission, even Argyll and Bute Council, it can be hard for everybody to be on the same page. So it's a big ambition, but the point of the bill is to try to say, can we make plans to try and put everything into one framework? Next slide. So just very briefly, what's in the bill at the moment is national government and local government and health boards have to produce food plans. They're going to be legally required to do that. And that at least is a start. And those food plans have to read across all those areas we talked about. The Food Coalition is working for strengthening the bill. So we want a clearer purpose in the bill. We want a clearer focus on the right to food. We want clear outcomes and indicators for the national plans and the local plans. And we want an independent food commission so that government's not just marking its own homework on this. And as we've heard today, government's doing some great stuff on this, but governments don't last forever. And it's really important that there's some independent body that can report on how well we're actually doing across the piece, and that Parliament gets involved in looking at that too. We want to make sure that government has to implement the plan, because at the moment the bill's quite weak on that. And we want to make sure that there's lots of participation built into the process, so that these food plans are really owned by people in communities and organizations, not just a sort of something that comes out from the government and nobody really pays any attention to. So that's the slides, and we're really happy to talk much more about that, and do email Steph or go onto the website if you want to find out more. But I just wanted to say something to finish about the right to food, because I think today's meeting has been a fantastic example about what the right to food means. It doesn't mean, oh, I can go into McDonald's and get a free burger. What it means is that government and organizations are working together to look at how we can ensure that everybody has access to a healthy, sustainable diet, and everybody can take pride and pleasure in their food, which is a big thing at the heart of the Good Food Nation policy. And today's been just great, because we've not been talking about just one thing. We've talked about with school meals, not just giving children food, although that's really important, but also dignity. How do the children and young people feel about the way that the meals are provided, and choice and company? How can they enjoy the meals with other people? And that's all part of the right to food. But also, how do we get the food? Local suppliers and the importance of local small-scale producers in delivering on the right food. So that's a big idea. And then we've gone out from there and we've looked at transport, and actually how transport and food are intimately connected, how important it is to get access to shops, but not just access to shops, reducing the challenges on household income by making transport more affordable, and then allowing people to participate more in society, which includes being able to share meals, being able to have meals in company, being able to go along to community garden, or the whatever community things you want to get involved in. So we've seen how the right to food isn't just about food policy. And the great thing about the bill is it means that Scottish ministers, whenever they're considering any policy, whether that's transport or planning or education or health, have to be thinking about the right to food and how will their policy in a different area help to promote the right to food. So I think today's been a really great example of that principle being spelled out in practice. And thanks very much. It's been a really useful session. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Pete. We've got a couple of minutes if anybody has a question that they want to pose to you. And yeah, so I'll just give it a second there, actually. If anybody's got a question that you want to pop in the chat, Pete's available for another minute or so before we wind up today. Because I know the Good Food Nation bill has been on people's minds, many of our minds, for a while now. And there's been a lot of progress in the past little while. But I just wonder if anybody does have any questions you want to ask at this stage, that's great. And otherwise, I will start winding us up.
Chelsea, I'll ask a question if that's all right.
Of course.
Pete, we know we're waiting for the RAIN committee to publish its report. What are you hoping to see in that report? Are you hoping to see any movement, or do you anticipate any movement in the bill as it currently is?
We're really hopeful, Jane, thanks. Yeah, obviously they looked at it yesterday. We haven't seen it yet, but we know that from the evidence sessions, including the one you gave, which is great, that they really want to strengthen the bill. You know, there's cross-party support for a much stronger bill that does more. And I think that's the main thing. And we're getting, at the moment, sort of good noises from the government that they're happy to talk about things. Always the legal people get involved and say, oh, you know, you can't really put that in legal language, or we'll pick that up in secondary legislation. But I think there's always a danger with secondary legislation that, you know, we take our eye off the ball and the committee sort of lets things through that really could have been stronger. So I think for us, really keen to get stronger objectives for these food plans so that everybody knows, okay, here's what our food plan's supposed to be delivering. How do we do that? I think participation is hard to write in law, but we're really hopeful. And today's a great example of how many people are interested in this. And once the food plans have sort of become something that councils and the government have to do, I think there'll be no shortage of people wanting to pitch in and put their ideas in, which would be absolutely great. And we're hopeful still that there'll be a food commission, because we think, you know, things are going well in lots of areas at the moment. I think school food works fantastic, but you know, governments change too. And often with these things, you do need an independent body that can sort of keep saying, well, we're doing well on this, but we're not doing so well on that. A bit like the UK Climate Change Committee, which, you know, is very good at saying, here's we're making progress, but we really need to do a lot more on this if we're going to achieve what we've said we want to achieve. And I think so that independent commission, I think, is really important.
Thanks, Pete.
Thanks very much, Pete, and thanks, Jane. That was a great final question for this. I'm going to pop the Menti link just back in the chat again. I'd love for everybody to take just a minute or two to give us some feedback on today's event or the events that you've been at previously. This is the final of our 4 learning events in the series, and it's been a real pleasure to be hosting these with a whole range of different, very interesting, really helpful speakers across the series. We've loved seeing the participation from across Scotland and throughout. So if you can just take a second to pop that in, that would be super. And I will, in the meantime, put up our slide just one more time to show you where you can find out more information about the events that we've already had previously. All the resources and materials, the slides will be going up there. I know some people were asking about that in the chat just now. If you've got any further questions about the Dignity in Practice project, there's our email there as well. And I just wanted to say, as we wind up today, a big thank you to Jane for moderating today, both panels. Even though, as she mentioned, transport isn't exactly in her wheelhouse, I thought you did a brilliant job. So really appreciate that. To Nikki and Chris, who were able to share their views and thoughts about the free school meal extension, and to Vivian and Susie for a really lively discussion in the second panel. Really appreciate your time and consideration. Also, big thank you to everybody who has been helping us to facilitate the event series. So the Dignity Advisory team have been absolutely brilliant, coming along and helping out in the breakout rooms and also popping in to the main session as well. Really appreciate it. And to all of you for joining the sessions all together. So that's us for today. Thank you so very much. As I say, there will be lots more information available on our website, and I hope you have a wonderful day.